Good evening, everybody. I'm Mayor April Graves, Mayor of Brooklyn Center. It's my great honor to welcome all of you to tonight's town hall with Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. We're gathered here in the spirit of community, engagement, and progress, because your voices, your concerns, and your ideas matter. Congresswoman Omar has been a tireless advocate for the people of Minnesota, championing policies that lift up working families, fight for justice, and ensure that all voices, no matter how big or small, are heard at the highest levels of government. Tonight's an opportunity to connect, ask questions, and discuss the issues that shape our daily lives. Democracy thrives when we come together, share our perspectives, and work toward solutions that strengthen our communities. So thank you all for being here. Your participation is what makes this town hall meaningful. Without further ado, let's give a warm Brooklyn Center welcome to Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Graves, for that warm welcome, and thank you to my colleagues from state and local government for your partnership. And thank you to all of you in the audience for joining us for this month's town hall. It is always a pleasure to be able to come back home to provide updates and answer your questions. As many of you know, we believe in co-governance, and hearing from you and others in the district guides our work here and in Congress. Working alongside my counterparts in the Minnesota legislature helps us better serve our constituents. This moment in U.S. history requires all of us to work together to preserve our democracy. And I am so grateful that we have strong and effective partners in Minnesota who are fighting alongside us. Now I am going to invite Representative Cedric Frazier to give some updates.
Good evening, everybody. Representative Cedric Frazier. We're going to do quick intros for all the individuals here, and then we're going to come back with remarks. So I just want to prime you for that. Don't think I'm going to shortchange you on the updates. Those will be coming soon. But Representative Cedric Frazier, District 43A. So I'm not far from here, just down the road. Represent New Hope and Crystal, and I'm glad everybody made it out tonight on a cool, rainy Minnesota day. But that's what you get when you're in Minnesota until we get to June. So good to see everybody.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad that we have a good show of people today. I was kind of worried that it would rain and then people would decide to stay home. I'm Senator Susan Pa, and this is my district, Senate District 38, Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, Osseo. So for those who don't live in these cities, welcome. To this district. I don't know, you may not know this, but Senate District 38 is actually the #1 most diverse district in the entire state of Minnesota. It is my honor to have all of you here in Brooklyn Center, and especially here in Brooklyn Center High School, where we have amazing students who are graduating this year from high school and starting their future. We have a very rich culture here in Brooklyn Center and very diverse families who are moving to this district because of all the great resources and people who already live here, the community of support. I just want to welcome all of you here, and I want to thank Congresswoman Omar for having her town hall here in Brooklyn Center. We love it when she's back home. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here. I am Samantha Vang, State Representative. I represent this House District 38B, and so if you live in Brooklyn Center, I am your state representative. And if you live around the Park Center High School area, I also represent that part of Brooklyn Park. So I'm happy to be here, happy to have Ilhan Omar be here with us today, as well as thank you to all the staff that helped organize and the school for offering the space here. I'm very proud to represent Brooklyn Center, as this school specifically has always been a trailblazer. Brooklyn Center School is one of the first schools to pioneer a full-service community school service to serve our students beyond just the classroom. And I'm very happy to champion legislation to give ongoing funding to continue that work and the work and to forward throughout the state of Minnesota. And I just want to provide a little bit of context here today too as well. Recently, we had the 5-year anniversary of George Floyd, and shortly after, a year later, George Floyd's death, there's the death of Daunte Wright that occurs. But I'm very hopeful and very optimistic that the communities, especially the state of politics that we're in, how polarizing, how divisive that we're in right now, and how we are our communities are being targeted. I'm optimistic about how resilient our communities have been. And so despite all the chaos that we've been through together, Brooklyn Center, I think, is definitely a model to be able to see what's beyond and to show the future of Minnesota and the future of Minnesota and of America, what we could look like, how we can live together, and what we can do if we continue to invest in our communities. And so thank you so much for all being here. Happy to answer any questions on the work that we have done here for this district and for the state of Minnesota.
Hi, everyone. I'm Representative Larry Kraft, District 46A, St. Louis Park.
Hi, everyone. I am Sandra Feist. I represent District 39B. That's parts of New Brighton, St. Anthony, and Columbia Heights. Hi.
Hi, State Representative Mike Freiberg. I represent District 43B, just a little bit down Highway 100, all of Golden Valley, all of Robbinsdale, a little bit of Crystal, and a little bit of Plymouth. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Representative Erin Cagle. I represent Fridley, Hilltop, Columbia Heights, and Spring Lake Park. Shout out to my Hilltop mayor up there.
So the next part of our agenda today is that we have each been given 60 to 90 seconds to give you an update on a specific policy area. So I am an immigration attorney. I'm also the vice chair of the Public Safety Committee in the House. So I will be covering immigration and public safety. So here I go. On immigration, we have seen the impact of the federal government obviously has been dramatic. Increasingly arbitrary enforcement of our immigration laws against people who are here without legal status. We have also seen attacks on legal immigrants, taking away legal status from students, from people who are here on humanitarian parole status, and interruptions in the legal process for people to apply for asylum, to apply for green cards, to apply for citizenship. We've also seen the elimination of the sensitive locations policy. So schools, hospitals, courts, religious institutions used to be safe spaces that ICE said that they would not typically operate in. They have rescinded that memo, and so those locations are no longer officially safe spaces. We've seen ICE operating in courts, and we have seen them surveilling schools that have large communities of undocumented students and families, so it's not good. I will end my comments with what we are doing that is good, so stay tuned. We've also seen the elimination of due process for immigrants, both at the port of entry and in the United States, deportations without hearing to random countries like Sudan, Libya, and of course El Salvador. And we have seen an expansion of this concept of expedited removal, so removing people without opportunity to appear before a judge. And so that is the update on immigration. On the public safety front, they've also eliminated a lot of funding that was really important for public safety. They cut funding recently for criminal justice initiatives and programs, including funding to solve violent crime, to foster law enforcement and behavioral health collaborations that respond to people in crisis, to reduce repeat offending, and to make the justice system faster, fairer, and more cost-effective. So that funding is no longer. But at the state level, we're doing things to support immigrants. We have an Office of New Americans to support immigrants as they integrate into our workforce. And we have expanded Minnesota Care to include all low-income Minnesotans regardless of immigration status, and we are still fighting for that as the negotiations continue. And lastly, we are doing our best to create barriers between state and local agencies and the federal government so that they cannot share immigration data and cannot collaborate on immigration enforcement. On the public safety front, we have protected the community violence prevention funding that Representative Frazier championed last term. And we are investing heavily in community supervision to help people who are out of incarceration to stay out and to be in our communities. And I have other things. I'll just say restorative justice is something that we are also really investing in and care about, especially me. But we're trying to protect that too. And anyway, I'm sure I went over 90 seconds, but that is the update on immigration and public safety. Thank you.
Everybody, I'm going to see if I can get us back. I'll see if I can be under 90 seconds. We'll try. I'm going to talk a bit about healthcare, and Sandra mentioned this when she talked about the keeping folks that are undocumented having access to healthcare here, which was a big deal for us when we passed that in 2023. We were fighting hard to make sure we continue to make sure people get the care that they need as long as they're here in our state. And let me be clear when we talk about undocumented immigrants. We're talking about individuals that have been in our communities for decades. We're talking about folks that are our neighbors, our kids play with their kids. These are our folks that we know and we care for. So I just want to make that clear when you think about who these individuals are that would be kicked off of health care and not have access to life-saving care. But this big bill just passed not too long ago. And one of the things that they have to do in that bill to cover the $1 trillion tax cuts for folks that have a lot of money that don't really need those kind of tax cuts, they have to find places to save money. And one of the areas they're doing that is through cuts through Medicaid. And let me tell you, let me tell you what that means for Minnesota. In Minnesota, we could lose $500 million a year in federal Medicaid funding. 253,000 Minnesotans could lose their health care coverage. And more uncompensated care in our hospitals. Who's going to pay for that? We are going to pay for that. Taxpayers are going to pay for that. So all of this conversation about bringing down cuts, making your life more affordable, none of that is actually true when we're talking about making cuts to the tune of trillions of dollars for folks that don't need those cuts. And a main point I want you to know, when we talk about who we're helping with this tax cut, families making around $20,000 a year will face higher out-of-pocket costs in medical debt. These are the folks that we're going to be fighting for. And I will tell you, based on determining on when this actual budget bill actually passes, we're likely going to have to come back to a special session to try to find ways to ensure that more people don't get harmed by this legislation that's coming from the federal level. I'll stop it there to stay under my time, and we'll have more conversation as we move forward. Thanks, everybody.
Once again, I'm Mike Freiberg. In the House, I chair the Elections Committee, so I'm going to talk a little bit about elections and what's going on there. Now, we've made a ton of progress on the elections front at the state level, particularly last session when the DFL had the trifecta. We passed automatic voter registration, pre-registration of 16 and 17-year-olds, and we restored the vote to people living in our communities serving probation thanks to Representative Frazier's bill. But this progress can be severely undermined at the federal level if Congress passes the SAVE Act. You may have heard about that, but this flawed bill does nothing to ensure that our elections are safer or fairer. It's quite the opposite. It would require voters in federal elections to provide proof of citizenship through documents that may be difficult for many to obtain, like passports or original copies of birth certificates. This could be a serious hurdle to voting if you've ever changed your name, like many married women have, many trans people have. So it's just a needless barrier being put in place. The bill mandates voter purges and threatens election workers with imprisonment for up to 5 years if they register somebody without the correct documents, even if the registered voter is a citizen. Election officials are vital to our democracy and shouldn't have to fear criminal penalties just because they did their job. Yeah. So the SAVE Act has passed the U.S. House. It's waiting for action on the U.S. Senate. My hope is that doesn't happen there. My hope is that the filibuster holds firm and no Democrat breaks ranks there. I appreciate Congresswoman Omar for her steadfast opposition to the SAVE Act.
Have a big impact in our community are being held up because there's not enough staff in DC to go through the grants. And so that's really, and then it ends up costing our projects more. And also, the Biden administration had passed this thing called the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the IIJA, or the bill, or whatever you wanted to call it. But it invested, what did they end up calling it? But anyway, it ended up investing a lot in our transportation system, but not just investing in our transportation, but trying to gear us towards a more climate just transportation system. And so that is something. And so that is something that we are already seeing kind of some of those things be rolled back and paused. But on the other hand, here in Minnesota, because of the work that our transportation chairs, Chairs Hornstein and Chair Dibble did, we made really large investments and had a very large transformational transportation budget last year. And so because of the investments we made as a state, and the things that we did for our own community, especially here in the metro with the half cents or the quarter cent sales tax, and raising the gas tax to repair our roads and bridges, we're in good shape. So we can maybe absorb some of those and still build the transformational transit system that we want. And as we know, transportation is one of our largest emitters of greenhouse gases. And so with that, I will turn it over to Representative Kraft.
Thank you. I'm Larry Kraft. I am the Vice Chair of the Climate and Energy Committee in the House. So as the impacts of climate change are accelerating in Minnesota and around the country, we have Donald Trump and the Republicans burying their heads in the sand with this appropriations bill that just passed the House. I call it the dumb, dumber, and dumbest bill. On the dumb side, it is basically a full repeal of Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. And the IRA is the first federal action that is on the scale necessary to address climate change. This repeal will increase U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by 500 million metric tons per year by 2030, which is the equivalent of operating 110 coal-fired power plants for a year, not to mention the increase in air pollution that will be the result. Dumber than that is that it's economically stupid because renewables are the cheapest source of energy. So this bill will raise electricity rates 9% by 2030, a total of $25 billion in added costs for households and businesses. It will reduce cumulative clean energy investments by $1 trillion in this country over the next decade. And it will cede some of the largest growth markets of this century to China. EVs, batteries, renewables, which is a $1.4 trillion a year market today, growing to $2.5 trillion. But the dumbest part of this is that we can't get these things back. And it is especially our kids and grandkids that are going to be paying the price for this horrific and short-sighted legislation.
So I have the privilege to serve on the Housing and Homelessness Committee on the Senate side. And so housing is actually one of my top priorities because, of course, I think we all can agree that every Minnesotan deserves a safe and stable place to call home. In 2025, the Trump administration cut $1.3 billion from the Housing Choice Vouchers program. And these cuts are already disturbing housing supports across the country, including Minnesota. The immediate impacts are that fewer vouchers will be issued, and we actually have 33,000 families here in Minnesota that depend on these vouchers for housing. That means that they could potentially face homelessness and displacement. So another thing that impacts housing and affordability here in Minnesota is the new 2025 tariffs that are impacting housing affordability. That's driving up construction costs, pricing out Minnesotan families from homeownership, from affordable housing options, and that's worsening our housing shortage here. 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, that was just in March of 2025, adds about $7,000 to $10,000 more per house. Tariff hikes on Canadian lumber, going from 14% to 40% in April of 2025, adds about $17,000 to $22,000 more per home that's being built. New tariffs on drywall, and then also a baseline of 10% increase in tariffs on nearly all imports. That means building materials like nails, wiring, appliances, all of that adds to the cost of homes. So as you can tell, housing is already a struggle for us to be able to build affordably. And these tariffs are not a help. So not only are we going to struggle with housing for starter families and for our new and upcoming young people who want to be homeowners, but we're also struggling with people who currently are already in voucher programs that provide some stability. Now they may potentially be displaced. So as DFL legislators, we're committed to making sure that we have housing affordability here. This year, we're investing millions of dollars into housing affordability and funding for new starter home builds and new construction here. We're continuing to look out for Minnesotans and making sure that we work with our legislators, our federal congresswomen and congressmen and senators to make sure that we're funding investments for new construction, housing, and also for affordable housing. So I appreciate the partnership that we have with our federal legislators, because that's really important. And especially for Minnesota, we've had a great relationship with them in advocating for these things for Minnesota. So thank you.
All right. This year, I am also the chair of Legacy Finance Committee. In Legacy, we invest in protecting our drinking water, restoring our native habitat, and also investing largely in our arts and culture and heritage here in Minnesota. And as we heard from the Trump administration, that they have largely cut funding for humanities. These are dollars that many of our arts and cultural institutions and history museums rely on. Much of it are general operational dollars. And as chair of Legacy, I was able to invest in our humanities funding in about $26 million, so that our arts and history and our museums and cultural institutions can continue to serve our communities here in Minnesota. I also served as a former agriculture chair in the last biennium in the Minnesota House, and we invested a lot in small farmers more than ever before. Of course, cuts from federal funding, especially in the local food purchasing grants. These are grants that organizations like Second Harvest or food banks can purchase directly from our small farmers. And these are new markets, and also during the pandemic, these small farmers are able to serve and bridge the food insecurity gaps here in Brooklyn Center too as well. And so the administration has cut billions of dollars worth of the local food purchasing grant. In the state, Minnesota, although we have not been able to recover all the funds that the federal cuts are doing, we were able to invest at least in $1.4 million ongoing to support our local farmers in the state, so that we can continue to feed Minnesotans. And I will leave it at that, and I will invite Congresswoman Omar for her remarks.
Thank you, Sam, and all of our incredible legislators. So as many of them have discussed, there is a lot happening in Washington. You heard a little bit about the passing of the reconciliation package. Somebody said it was dumber and dumbest or something like that. But I like to say that it is basically a cruel, wasteful, and shameful spending plan. It is a recipe for American decline. It will strip healthcare from nearly 14 million Americans. It will end food benefits for 3 million Americans. They are ending dozens of climate programs that were driving resurgence in American manufacturing and clean energy. The specific policy writers in here are a wish list for the far-right and Christian nationalists. They're defunding Planned Parenthood, gutting benefits for immigrants, tightening the private health insurance marketplace, increasing student loan payments, ramping up cruel immigration enforcement and deportation of people without due process. They are banning state regulation of AI and gutting the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. The poorest Americans will become even poorer while the richest of Americans will benefit, including corporations. It will explode the federal deficit, making our national debt even more expensive to maintain. It is hard to say just how stupid and horrible this plan is, but ultimately they have an audience of one, which is Donald Trump. And Donald Trump only cares about his bank account and his billionaire friends. Next, this bill is headed to the Senate. After they amend it, the House and the Senate will hash out their differences and try to pass a compromising bill. I am going to do everything that I can to make sure this bill does not pass and the American people are not harmed. I want to remind you all that our office is a liaison for you to the federal government. We can be a crucial line of advocacy for our constituents who are experiencing issues with the federal government, like irregularities, delays, and emergencies. Although it is a difficult environment right now for us to work through, it is our duty to make sure that we are doing everything that we can for our constituents. In the last few weeks, we have worked to restore Social Security benefits, figured out issues with tax returns, expedited work permits, and reunited families. We can't solve every problem, but it is our promise to give it a go. Before I wrap up my remarks, I always like to introduce our staff that are here. So start with Adrian, who does our housing and education portfolio. We have Jean, who is the district director. Nikki, who manages our constituent work. Connor, who is the chief of staff. He mainly works out of DC, but he's a Minnesotan. We have Ladan, who runs the front office here in the district. Oh, Rujwani, who is our press secretary. And I think Fran and Talia, who you might have ran into when you registered. So I will wrap up my remarks by saying that this is a terrifying time in our country. Trump's administration and the movement he is leading meets every key indicator of a fascist takeover of the United States. glorifying our past and promising a return of greatness, spreading propaganda and creating a system to ensure this propaganda drives the news cycle, targeting universities, students, and what we call the intellectual elite, which means anyone who can read, creating a new reality that hides the truth for his supporters and anyone who is a passive observer of the news, creating a hierarchy above others and targeting immigrants and people of color, spreading nonstop fiction that Trump and his movement are the victims, focusing on law and order to cast any opponent as a criminal who should be imprisoned or deported, demonizing the LGBT community and destroying women's legal protections and bodily autonomy, dividing urban and rural communities and casting cities as areas of lawlessness, destroying unions and casting any opponent as weak or lazy. If we want to stop Donald Trump, we need to recognize what we are dealing with. He's already ignoring court orders, forcing law firms and universities to fall in line, and talking about disappearing U.S. citizens to foreign torture camps run by dictators. This is a 5-alarm fire for our republic, and it is going to take all of us paying attention, pushing back, and making sure that we are protecting each other and our communities, our Constitution, and our country. With that, I will hand it back over to Grisha.
Yes. Yes. And I was going to say, give her another round of applause because thank you. Premonition. So this part of the town hall, we're going to ask folks to have some community small group discussion, and we do have some leading questions. If you didn't get the questions, raise your hand. We'll have someone bring them to you. But what we want you to do is kind of turn to someone that's next to you or behind you and have some small time conversation. And to me, this is one of the most important parts of this, because when we talk about the things that we're facing, us organizing together is how we're going to fight back. And it's how we're going to make it out of this and make it on the other side, hopefully in a better spot than we were going into it. So the questions that we're going to ask you to have a conversation about is, one, what have you done to push back on Trump and Musk? What kind of actions, pushback, do you want to be involved in going forward? What resources, connections, information do you need? And what do you need to see more from your elected officials in how we fight and advocate and pushing forward on your behalf? So we're going to give you about 10 minutes to have this conversation with each other. If you came with somebody, that's great, but try to talk to someone that you didn't come with and get to know your community. All right, have at it.
She was better than I would have expected. But just negotiating with them is, she wasn't.
No, they went into the crowd.
Oh.
Okay. That's all.
Yeah.
Every time we try that stuff, there's also I don't have to
Yeah.
causes. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to have a business partnership guy talk about it. He said, "Oh, I can't. It's too complex for me." Then he had Harry Liskey come in. Sit at the table with us, which made no sense.
Yeah.
Then he's like, "Oh, I need to be a business partnership can testify." And Harry left. Before he left, he thought of business partnership to come back up and talk about how negotiations work. Like, it's supposed to be negotiated.
Yeah.
So what's that like?
Yeah. They're definitely very much top down.
Top down. How you doing? Hey, what's up? I'm gonna bring people back. Go ahead. Hey, we'll check. Okay, I'm gonna bring people back for question and answer. We'll be along. Okay. Okay. Amen. Okay, everybody, we're gonna bring people back. I think I might have misspoke with the 10 minutes, but we want to make sure we give people plenty enough time for the question and answer portion of this, so we can come on back. Come on back. It's getting a little quieter. Come on back. If you can hear me, clap one time. If you can hear me, clap 2 times. I want to say more, but I don't want to take it to church. All right. All right. I know everybody. Okay. Thank you for coming on back. Thank you for having that conversation. If you put any questions down or any comments down on your paper, drop that off at the registration desk. We do want to have that. We want to hear from you, and we'll give you feedback if you're asking for that. So please do that. But thank you for indulging on that conversation. I'm going to turn it back over to our wonderful Congresswoman.
Thank you, Fraser, and thank you all for participating. For those of you who have come to our town halls prior to this one and the last one, know that we don't usually do what we just did. It's usually me giving updates and then taking questions. So we'll get into that portion for the rest of the time. Raise your hand if you have a question. I will call on you, and one of my staff will come and bring the mic. Ali will start with the green over there. That was a fast hand raising. My staff will hold on to the mic. You can speak to it.
Thank you. Hi, Representative Omar. My name is Lauren Sherman. I live in Robbinsdale. I am a NIOSH trainee, so the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, through the Midwest Center for Occupational Health and Safety at the University of Minnesota. I would have never found this field, the industrial hygiene field, occupational hygiene, without the NIOSH-funded traineeship. Now I work as a senior environmental health and safety specialist at Medtronic, doing industrial hygiene using the very methods that NIOSH developed. I just returned from the AIHA, the American Industrial Hygiene Association's national conference, and almost everyone I met was a NIOSH trainee. We all stumbled into this field through the educational resource centers, and there's no other national pipeline into this field. The concern I bring today is not just about my career, it's about the future of occupational health and safety profession. ERC students go on to protect the workers in defense, medtech, semiconductor, and all the industries. And yet NIOSH's budget is just $2.20 per worker per year, while workplace injuries and illnesses cost the U.S. $250 billion annually. What are you doing to advocate for the restoration of funding for NIOSH, specifically the Office of Extramural Programs and the future of the ERCs that are essential to workforce safety across the country?
I appreciate that question. You must know that I'm the ranking member of the Workforce Protection Committee. We actually recently had a hearing where we deeply talked about what NIOSH does, the impact it has on the industry, and what the cuts would mean. As you know, on that same day, Secretary Kennedy was testifying and spoke about how there were no cuts, only to be reminded that 50% of the staff had been let go and they brought them back. And so it is something that we are continuously raising in the committee, even if the hearing is about that or not about that. We're working with the ranker for the whole committee on the education and labor to send letters to the administration to raise that issue. So that and workforce protection is top of mind for my office. So yes, thank you for raising that.
Good evening. I want to thank all of you for representing me, my family, and our community on the state and federal level. Thank you so very, very much. One thing that occurred to me a couple of months ago as the state legislature was in the budget negotiations was the comment that we would probably have to return to find out what the impacts of the federal budget was going to be on the state. And so I would like, my question is two parts. So from the state representatives, I'd like to know what you're thinking, best case and worst case, about how much our taxes are likely to go up to fund the programs that are going to be required for our health and well-being and what we believe as Minnesotans that we'll want to fund. It'll either be tax money or will be job cuts or service cuts. So I'm curious from the state level. From the federal level, this is probably maybe a touchy question. But when we're talking about these tens and hundreds of billions of dollars, and then you start dividing those numbers by 50 for the 50 states, I start to wonder whether there are just certain areas that the federal government can no longer support on a national level, and whether as Minnesotans who pay $1 but only get 70 cents back on that dollar, whether we are actually better off to hold back, for the federal government to step out of certain programs, let that money stay with the states, and for our states to actually provide the level of health, education, disaster. I know this is a state, almost verging on a state rights question, but you do have to wonder whether it has to almost be every state for themselves in certain areas and whether we've come to that time.
I'll answer that first. I'll answer that first part of it, and I don't know if we would be able to tax our way out of it, to tell you the truth. It would just be too much of a burden for our, I don't know if we'd be able to tax our way out of it. It would be a huge burden for our residents. And so, you know, to tell you the truth, we don't know how we're going to do it. And that's, so, yeah, so this is kind of funny. I actually asked DOR about this early in the session. And from my understanding, and I'm not on taxes, I have no idea if this is true or not. So, but from my understanding is the businesses and people, people who pay taxes remits directly to the federal government, IRS. And so we wouldn't have a way to hold that back unless we stopped payments from going, I mean, like we would have to prevent them from using the IRS systems to remit taxes. Yeah, no, I would love to do that. Believe me, I would love to. Conceptually, it'd be wonderful. Logically, I don't know if we could.
So, I mean, I think to Representative Kegel's point, the federal government does directly take your money. So there is no way for, as the way it's set up right now, there is no way for the state to make an alternative decision on that money, because you do pay your state and federal taxes separately.
Hello once again.
You gonna ask the same question?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
I thought that was you. I thought
Yes. Great seeing you again. So, well, my question is to you is, as of today, the National Democrats still don't get their acts together to fight for the people. From disqualifying David Hogg as vice chair to stifle efforts to impeach Donald Trump by your colleague Sri Tenada in Michigan. National Democrats are so afraid of actually fighting for the people. We can keep pointing out for the next 10 years of how Trump is bad all day. We've been doing that for 10 years, okay? But there will be Trump 2.0, 3.0, and so forth if the Democrats keep on being incompetent on fighting against the Republican Party. When will the Democratic Party ever going to learn from their mistakes in 2016 and last year to actually going to fight for the working people? Can you tell me what are you going to do to hold the Democratic Party leadership accountable? And also, and also for the state leaders here, please tell Tim Walz to not be so adversarial towards the public sector unions when negotiating their contracts. Don't tell people to work for the state of Minnesota when he's just telling the Minnesota management and budgets to fight against his own employees.
I appreciate your question. I don't think I've ever been accused of not holding the partnership accountable, so I will continue to do that.
Hi, my name is Andrew Pearson. I currently just became the precinct chair for Ward 4, District 2 for Letitia Vital at the Ward Convention. Question is, what are you guys going to do at the federal level to hold Trump accountable for police immunity that he wants to give for the police? Because in the black community, of course, that we are still being killed unarmed by the police. So I want to know, what is the next step that we're going to do, you guys are going to do, not only just at a federal and a state level? What are we going to do to basically account when it comes to the police departments?
Thank you. Appreciate that. The president has been talking about that blanketed immunity. He doesn't have the authority to do that without legislation. And as you know, we are in the minority as Democrats. And so we don't actually have any tools within Congress to hold the president and his agenda accountable until we are in the majority. The way that the system works is the only people that are able to sue on behalf of Congress is the Speaker and the Majority Leader in the Senate. The Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader in the Senate. So when people say, Democrats, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? I mean, we don't run the committees. We can't do oversight. We can't subpoena. We can't hold anybody in contempt. All of those things we're only able to do if we are in the majority. And so in 2 years, we'll be able to get gavel stack and do that accountability.
Congresswoman, if I can add over here behind you. I
usually don't do town halls with so many legislators.
I like that question because I can talk about some of the work we did here in Minnesota. We just had the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, and a lot of the work that came out of that, like for police accountability, we strengthened the licensing board so they can actually take action on anything involving ethical complaints or use of force complaints like that. We changed the way that shootings are investigated. It used to be specifically in that department, so they were investigating themselves. That is now an independent investigation by the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. We've invested more money in our community so that we can do alternatives to policing in terms of crime intervention and prevention, which, by the way, is one of the things they're cutting at the federal level. So we're doing everything we can do here. The immunity piece, we have not been able to address. Strong opposition from Republicans, but that's something we're going to keep working on.
Sorry. Don't hold the mic.
That happened. Thank you for being a Jedi in this episode of Star Wars. May the Force be with you.
Thank you.
30 years ago, I left the U of M to work at a hospital in New York City. I cared for my first patient dying of AIDS, who contracted it from sharing a needle because he was an opiate addict. This community has been my heart for 30 years. And this opiate epidemic is not over. The governor didn't talk about it in the state of the state. Mayor Fry did not talk about it in the state of the city. These Medicaid cuts are going to decimate our treatment beds. We need Narcan like nobody's business. And so anyone here from any other city, look at what Minneapolis has done. We have 2 Narcan dispensers at Station 21 and now Station 14. The next one's at Station 5. That opiate epidemic money should be used to put Narcan on the street because we've got to buy time. To save one life, it's if you saved all of humanity. Quran 5:2. So if you could speak to how these Medicaid cuts and how we can keep the opiate epidemic at bay. Because we lost 11 mental health facilities in 2023. Even Mayo closed their chemical dependency unit. And for our governor and Mayor Fry not to talk about what Medicaid's going to do to the opiate epidemic, if you could please go to D.C. and light it up. If you can speak to that.
So luckily here back in 2019, the legislature passed a bill that required the pharmaceutical industry to pay into the opioid epidemic response advisory council. And so the state now has a board that is tasked to deal with the opioid epidemic here in our state. Because we have done a good job with Narcan, our overdose deaths have gone down, but that's not stopping overdoses. And so it's just our opioid overdoses, it's moving on to bigger and better things now, like the fentanyl and some of these other drugs that can't be undone with opioid antagonists. But we have done some really good things as far as getting Narcan out onto the streets. I know our EMS and police and firefighters are all required to carry Narcan. Narcan is also required to be in every school in the state of Minnesota as well. And don't forget, you can easily go buy it at your pharmacy. They actually ask you now if you get a prescription for pain pills, if you'd like some Narcan along with it. So just always take it and give it to somebody. And so that's just, some of the things that we've done here in Minnesota. And we have been really doing a lot of work on the opioid epidemic front. But there's always something new coming, and there's always there's usually mental health, criminal justice, all sorts of things that go along with the opioid epidemic. And I've lived it through my family. It's something that, we were very lucky to come out on the positive end of this and I didn't lose a sibling, and he's still alive and actually getting married next summer. So this is something that really, I don't know how my brother made it out and so many families didn't, and I could probably tell you lots of reasons why, but this is something that we have really taken to heart here in the state of Minnesota, and I am very concerned to see what some of those Medicaid cuts would look like as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is unclear again, the level of devastation, right? Because we're all interconnected, and when we think about the healthcare cuts that are in the reconciliation bill, I did a press conference at HCMC, and they were talking about how, as an infrastructure, that infrastructure will be hurt, which means for even those of us who have private insurance, can be impacted by not getting the services that we want when we need them. And so, and I can't even begin to think about what will happen to, rural America, that oftentimes don't even have a lot of access to clinics and resources. I think on the opioid front, obviously in Congress, we've been doing a lot of funding to support communities. We've been funding a lot of community hubs to have that, the education, the accessibility. I myself was touched by opioids. My son's best friend died when he was 15 of fentanyl overdose. And so I know that as a community in this country, there isn't anyone that doesn't know at least one or two people that have been impacted, if they're not their own family members. So it is an issue that is deep within Congress, and we'll continue to have that conversation. And thank you for bringing that up. Okay, we'll go up. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't call on you yet. Can you wait? I was going to go.
Hello, Representative Omar. Thank you for being our representative and serving people in Minnesota so well. I wanted to raise the concern with you today that Trump is abusing his office to enrich his friends and family through a meme coin and through a cryptocurrency exchange that I do not understand, and I know most people in this room do not understand. But he is raking in, I don't even know how many millions of dollars from shadow investors.
400 million.
And we don't know who these people are that are buying these coins, and it has to be illegal. How can we, as Americans, hold him accountable and use the judicial branch to hold him accountable for these laws he is breaking? It is not right. Like Jimmy Carter sold his peanut farm. Like, what the hell's going on? He's doing this right in front of us, and he's causing all of this mess around us so that we don't even see it. How do we stop this from happening? This is wrong.
I mean, that is the $1,000,000 question. It is no secret that, the meme coin scheme, is should be completely illegal. Countries are basically buying in order to have influence with him. It's insanity. And the Republicans' response, because again, like I said, we don't have the ability to do any oversight and hold him accountable as of now. The Republicans' response has been he is transparent about it, which again, just because I steal in front of you, it doesn't mean that it is not illegal for me to steal. So that's been, Mike Johnson's response, is that, other presidents might have done shady things. We didn't know about it, so we had to look into it. But Trump is doing these shady things in front of us, and he's telling us about them, like getting a $400 million plane, from Qatar. He's doing it in front of us, so it should be fine. So I know that, there is an interest to track for the day when we can have that accountability, and his day will come. Sorry. Yes. Thank you for your patience.
What can we do to get rid of Citizens United, period? And on top of completely eradicating Citizens United and campaign finance reforms, tell me what it means to be propping up and supporting workers' unions of all types and creating new unions for every industry. What are you doing? What is the administration, your colleagues doing? Thank you.
Well, I love the union question as a former member of AFSCME. I appreciate that. I think in Minnesota we're actually leading the way in so many of our industries unionizing. And so I continue to stand in solidarity with them. I'm at picket lines. I'm at, coffee shops that are unionizing. I've supported efforts to unionize for a really long time, and we'll continue to do that. We have the PRO Act in Congress that we passed in the House. We weren't able to pass in the Senate when we were in the majority. Our hope is that it'll be in our top 5 pieces of legislation when we do get the chance to legislate again. Citizens United, we have so many pieces of legislation to get rid of it. But we don't have the kind of Congress that will get rid of it because so many members are propped up by it, right? I don't take corporate money. I don't meet with lobbyists. I don't take money from lobbyists. My campaigns are funded by the people, and it is for the people. I think there needs to be a movement of Americans voting for people who are not beholden to special interests. Because I will tell you this, there are so many of my colleagues that make every single decision with who is funding them in mind. Right? They make those calls. Many of them have no idea what bill they're voting for. Many of them are not reading them. We know that for the reconciliation bill that I just talked about earlier, when they did the manager's amendment, 30 minutes later, that vote got voted out of the Rules Committee. Hundreds and thousands of pages. You can't, 30 minutes is not enough time for anybody to have the confidence to vote for something like that, right? And so we know someone is telling them, take the vote. And I can confidently say 90% of Congress is funded by corporations, is funded by special interest lobbyists, is funded by people who don't have the interest of the American public or our country in mind. who don't, it's funny that they say America first because majority of the Republicans, what they prioritize and who they prioritize are not Americans. And they're not in the interest of Americans. And so when you see people taking away funding for universal school meals or refusing to pass something like that, they tell you, I'm America first, but they're willing to vote for, $3 billion to go to weapons to bomb kids in Gaza. They're going to tell you they're America first. The math ain't mathing, as the kids say. So, we have to make that decision about who we elect and the kind of questions that we ask folks.
Behind you.
Oh. Hi.
Did you want more comments on Citizens United? So we also have a reactionary right-wing Supreme Court that believes money equals speech, that believes rich people have more freedom than poor people, that believe corporations have more rights than natural citizens, than humans. So we need a new president who can appoint a new Supreme Court. We need reforms of the Supreme Court, like term limits, corruption, anti-corruption measures at the U.S. Supreme Court. Because, we have very strong ones at the state level, but there's nothing protecting us from the corruption of the U.S. Supreme Court right now. We've done things at the state level. There's a resolution calling on Congress to pass an amendment to overturn Citizens United, because that's probably what it will take, barring a Supreme Court reversal of the decision. We've tried to reduce the influence of money in our elections. You may have heard in our neighboring state of Wisconsin, Elon Musk was bribing voters, offering them $1 million if they sign a petition related to the election. So we introduced legislation to stop that sort of thing from happening in Minnesota. Unfortunately, in the Minnesota House of Representatives, we have a tie. We have an equal number of representatives that are Democrats and Republicans, and the Republicans blocked it because they have the ability to do that. So we need to have, we need to have new elected officials, both at the state and at the federal level, and we need to have new judges at the federal level.
And can I just say something about your union comment? We need solidarity across unions. Right now, what they're doing is they're dividing the unions between service and heavy highway or construction and the nurses. They're dividing the unions right down the middle. We need them to knock that, stuff off. There's more kids. And so we need solidarity across the unions. It doesn't matter if you're representing state employees or out, digging holes. We have to have solidarity of all workers, because we're not, if LIUNA goes on strike and the nurses aren't with them, that power isn't getting across. And so we need a real labor movement. So that's just, sorry.
Oh, I can stand up. Yeah.
Let him hold the mic.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Representative Omar. We've met a few times before here, in Brooklyn Center, and everybody up there I consider as a champion, but, particularly people that I've always supported you, Representative Frazier, and one of my favorites, Susan Pha, there. I have two quick questions here. One of them is, I've served on the school board in this district for 15 years and fought mainly to work on a shoestring to kind of get our kids in this public school to a point to where we have a partnership between our kids, our school staff, and our families here, to where we're serving everybody out here, because we can only do that now. That's the only way we can do it now with our public schools here and everything. My ask, because our teachers and staff work so hard and they're so valuable to us, we got our kids here now to where our graduation rates are high here, very high. And then when you talk about scholarships, and this is a school with about 80-something% students of color, and we got brilliant kids here of all different cultures here there that are doing great things.
I'm coming to hang out with them tomorrow morning.
Yeah, we average a little bit over million of scholarships every year for these kids going, and we're talking about full rides and things. So what we've done is plant the seeds of a lot of young people that are going to come back to this community and work hard in improving it. But that's just this district. I'm sure there's other ones doing that. My ask is that you keep the Queen of WrestleMania from destroying our public schools here, because we can't make it. We can't make it with the dumbing down of our public education here. Yeah, we just can't do that.
I appreciate that. I almost had to do a double take when I heard that that's who they were nominating for the Department of Education. As somebody who grew up being a wrestling fan, I know who Linda McMahon is, and I wouldn't trust her with my kids or anyone's kids, and because her own kids couldn't be trusted with her. We're doing everything we can to, again, like I said, I sit on the Education and Workforce Committee. We work really hard to center students, teachers, and the importance of educating the future of our country if we are to compete with the world. And it is quite unfortunate what they have been doing to the Department of Education. The courts are holding up, and so hopefully we will have a preserved Department of Education that will outlast this monstrous administration. So thank you. Ali will hold the mic.
Oh, sorry.
It's for the gentleman.
Yeah, sorry. So my name is Robert Marvin. I'm from Brooklyn Center. And one of the things that I've been a volunteer for over 20 years is for the Shoreline Restoration Project along Twin Lake Park. I don't know, some of you guys maybe have seen it. And about 2 or 3 months ago, the DNR came through and did a burn on it. They burned it all down. And I did some videos on that as well. And basically, one of the things they did is when they did the burn was they displaced a nesting family of otters, as well as burned out a nesting loon site. So there was Minnesota loons that were nested there. And then, basically it's kind of bothers me a lot that they did that. And then basically over the last, you didn't know, but the last I got a lot of videos over on my feed, but anyway, then over the last 2 months, that same site has been mostly recovered from the burnout. And then what happened is they haven't been maintaining the fencing very well. And here on Sunday over Memorial Day weekend, there were people that came to the park and they brought in a lot of little kids and stuff. And they had a 4-wheeler and they let these little kids ride the 4-wheeler. We're talking like little kids, 6 years old, 8 years old, drive around in the 4-wheeler. And then what they did was they drove that 4-wheeler into the Shoreline Restoration Project where all this was and totally destroyed it. They just tore it all up with the 4-wheelers. And then a lot of the neighbors called the police, and of course the police came out, and they just turned it all over to the Park and Rec. So basically, to me, people who've been volunteering to help the community and help the city for 20 plus years, we have really beautiful flowers there. It's one of the better flowering areas for bees and hummingbirds and stuff. And it's just not being taken care of. And then they're doing stuff like burning it out when literally it displaced a family of otters, and there was previously a couple of years ago, there was a family of otters out there that was on Highway 100 that got killed. And basically I'm looking to see what we can do to, do better on, taking care of our wildlife in our area here.
Thank you, Mr. Marvin, for your comments and for letting us know. I would love to follow up with you in a conversation with the DNR. I know that Twin Lakes is actually a beautiful lake, one that a lot of residents use, recreation, and a lot of people around this really just love that lake, and it needs to be taken care of. And so let's connect after this. I think we actually have each other's contact.
All right, we'll take 2 questions because we're out of time.
Hi there. Thanks for everybody for being here. You know, it is so hard to not leave meetings like this just being hopeless, right? As a mother, a grandmother, a person who's 73 years old, I want to hear from the state level people and from you. What's the one thing that we can do to, you know, because, you know, I mean, by design, you know, it's like almost like the blenders on puree. We have all of this stuff going on and, you know, all of that. But what's the one thing we can do to, you know, to be helpful? I'm a nurse. I volunteer for the Red Cross. I carry Narcan with me. I also volunteered in elementary school. You know, we try to model kindness in our family, but, you know, what can we do? What's the one thing we can do when we leave here?
Thanks. So something that I mentioned in the small group that I was with, that I'm obsessed with this documentary on Netflix. It's called Join or Die. And it is about how civic engagement is the key to a strong democracy. And whether it is a bowling league or a book club or the League of Women Voters or coming to a town hall, like getting engaged is going to have a direct impact on our democracy. And also it's fun and affirming and joyful. And sometimes this can be really hard. And, you know, one thing that I do at the legislature that some of my colleagues think is ridiculous, but I like it, which is I'm the co-lead in the House of Civility Caucus. So Civility Caucus, there are 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats in each body, and we organize events to get together. And we've done bipartisan karaoke, which is ridiculous as it sounds, but it was really fun. But, you know, getting to know people who have different beliefs than you on a human being level, it helps them trust you and learn from you and vice versa, and it's going to get us through this, so don't lose hope.
I also want to say that, you know, we're all representing different districts here, but there's a lot of us in the room. And so I think that is one thing that we can do is come together, maybe outside of just our Senate districts or, you know, our communities. And so one of the things that some of our colleagues have been doing is putting together resistance labs. And so one thing that I can commit to you guys is that I will work to organize one of these resistance labs here in the North Metro. And so, you know, and I'm hoping that we can get all the legislators as well to take part in it. And so that's one thing I can do. And I know Larry has.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you've done the one thing by coming out here, right? It may seem small or that you've come out, but it's actually not. I mean, coming out, participating, talking about your concerns, being in community with others. I mean, that's how we build a movement. And then from there, how do we organize? How do we protest? How do we do? But it is in these kinds of things where I find hope, right? And seeing the number of folks here. So, you know, you've done the one thing, and then the second thing will be different for all of us. But thanks for coming out.
Yeah, I want to say I echo all the remarks from my colleagues. You know, I just, you know, being a former ag chair, I learned a lot about some of the mistakes that we did in rural communities. How right now rural communities are suffering because we did leave them behind. They're unable to organize now. They have less access to information. They have less access to their elected officials, not knowing public notices or town halls or meetings. And I think one of the key things that we are able to do here in urban areas is because we can still engage. We can still stay informed. We can still talk to each other. And that's something that we must continue to do to help each other out, to talk to one another, to stay sane. And now we're seeing a lot of the rural communities coming to urban areas. And still, the largest exports from rural communities are young people. And we need to be able to, and we need to keep young people also engaged too as well. And so I think just learning about how rural communities have been overtaken and how we need to reorganize in those areas, and starting with ourselves here in the metro area and going out from there.
I think that was a good last question to ground us, so thank you for that. I do also echo the sentiment of my colleagues. I would say the one thing that is vitally important in this moment is to not lose hope. There is hope in each other. There is hope in the fight. There is hope for a better tomorrow. And as somebody who's been through a lot in life, I will tell you that not losing hope is the one thing that has sustained me and allows me to be able to know that as long as I can talk and I can walk, that I can forge forward a better future than the one I currently have. And so, as my dad used to say, it is up to us to think that our tomorrow will be better than our today. And that mindset is what keeps you going. So thank you all again for joining us for this month's town hall. Thanks again to our incredible Minnesota legislators. I will stick around if you want to chat and you are too shy to ask your question. But again, thank you and see you in next month's town hall.